Hello. In this video, I'm going to cover how to take a single-page React app that was created with Vite and integrate it with a multi-page app that was also created with Vite, but not necessarily with React. So here I have a to-do list app that was created using npm create Vite at latest, and then selecting the JavaScript option with React. So created select React and select JavaScript. So that was how this project was created, and it means that it has the React plugin installed and set up in the Vite config. It has ESLint doing linting, which is like spell check for your code, and all of those things are installing different packages that you can see in the package.json. I also use one other dependency, the IDB IndexedDB promise library in this app. And so it's going to be important that when you come over into another app that you want to integrate, that you bring over those dependencies. So let's just quickly see what this app looks like. This is a to-do list app, and it uses IndexedDB to save the to-do list items to the browser, and that way when you reload the page, everything sticks around, all those changes that you made. So this is just a single page app rendered using a main.jsx, which has a single React create root, React DOM create root that plugs into the body of the HTML, single HTML file that imports that main.jsx and renders that single component, which is called app, that you can go to the definition for. It's just the entire app is coming out of this one React component here. So what to do to integrate this? First, let's make sure this server is stopped so we can reuse that port, and go to the front end portfolio in another window and see this is on /front end portfolio, and it has a consistent nav by putting the same HTML on all the different pages. But then this page, for example, uses React.js by creating a React root inside of this demos React Burger. There's a React root JSX that does a query selector for main, and then puts a React root for this burger component. This entire everything here is this component. So that you can have this interactive React app, but only on this page, whereas this page is vanilla JavaScript, and so are the other two pages. So each has its own index.html. Now, typically in a React app, you would have a single root, and then you would swap out the component that's being rendered based on your navigation. But because this is a true multi-page app, we actually have separate index.html files for the different types of app. That way you can also have vanilla apps in the same destination or the same origin. So what we're going to do is follow this same pattern to create another React root on another HTML page and add it to the nav across all the indexes, or all the indices. So I will just create a new folder in here called, I'll put it inside of demos, and I'll call this folder the to do. So that will be the path, demos/to do, and in here I'll just paste the main JSX file from the to do app. I'm also going to need the CSS file in this case because it imports from ./CSS. But that won't come into play until we're working with the app itself. So first I'm just going to copy this over and paste it in. But what I would have to do right now, if I didn't have the necessary dependencies, which I already do in this project because I've already had a React app here, I would need to make sure I have all of the linting, if I want linting, all the linting plugins added using npm install. And I would need to make sure I have, especially, most importantly, have the React and React DOM packages, because those are not going to, we're not going to be able to use React without those. And then we'll also need the Vite.js plugin React, and make sure we have a Vite config.js where we import that plugin and use that plugin. So that's already happening in this multi-page app, so we don't have to do those steps. So next, we've imported this main JSX. We need the create root in the strict mode, but we don't necessarily need all of the app stuff yet. We just simply need to render this root. So I'll delete everything except for that, and then I'm going to make sure that this gets rendered where we want. So for now, app is not existent, so I'll comment that out. And this is saying it's going to query selector for body. And what I'm going to do is call this, rename this to React Injector. You see here I called it React Root. It's just an arbitrary name, but its purpose is just to inject React into this HTML file. So I'm going to copy, an example HTML file from one of the other folders and then start editing things. So the footer can be the same, and the main is going to be right here. So that would be fine, except for the main.jsx already is defining some main content, if I recall, and you only really want to have one main content per page. So this is just a peculiarity of my app. If I look for main, I'll see I already have a header, I already have a main, and I already have a footer. So at this point, I really need to just have the nav. Ideally, the nav would go inside of, say, the header, for example, but we're going to have to somehow combine these two strategies here. So here you see the title is this part, and then the nav links are this part right here, and these are inside of a header. So it would probably be best if the to-do app did not mess with that sort of configuration. So what I'm going to do here is just assume that we're going to put the content in main, and then we can adjust the to-do app slightly to fit that. So here I'll leave this, I'll just call this main so that we don't have any of whatever styling was going on with this other one, and I can leave the footer as is, and then we can just render the React Injector JSX. So we have a script of type module, and it's pulling in this JSX right here, and that's going to render the root. So we want a query selector for main in this case, and we're going to render inside of that the app. So where's the app going to come from? We can go ahead and put that in React Components folder, which I already have in source because I've already been working in React a little bit. So I'll create a new folder called to-do app, and in there I'll put in index.jsx. Actually, I might just be able to paste that main JSX again. No, that went the HTML. So I'm going to paste the main JSX again and then just rename it. So copy, and I'm going to need the CSS too. Don't have any components at this point in there, so I'm just going to need these two. And I'll click here, and no, not here, but the React Components to-do app, and paste there. So now I have those two, and I'll rename this to index.jsx so I can import it nicely from the to-do app folder. Now I don't need the create root part of this. I just need the app parts, and I'm going to have an issue importing from IDB if I don't add IDB, so I'll have to npm I IDB on this project. And now I can import default export as long as I export the app component as default. So I can export default app from to-do app folder, since this is an index.jsx, and that means I can go into my React Injector and import as whatever name I like. So I could call it to-do app or to-do application, and I'll do from slash, meaning source, because that's how the Vite app is configured, slash React Components slash to-do app. So that's correct, and then I'll use it right here and get rid of this comment. So now I won't have a nav link to it because I haven't actually added that nav link yet to the nav on the other pages, but I should be able to change this to do and go to that page. Okay, so we're getting a lot of the right things happening, a lot of the right styling, which is good. The only downside is that not everything looks great yet. So to fix that, we have some styling that's focused on, main, for example, and then main is being used twice, which is not correct. Main should only be really one place in any given application. So I may have to adjust my to-do app slightly. You also see that the SVG is not getting imported properly, and this reveals a bug that is in this particular app right now, where the if I reload, and this image is probably being cached up here, this logo, but there's actually a bug right now in this multi-page app where the root is source and the SVG is actually in a public folder above source. So we need to actually put our public folder inside of source so that we can import things properly. And then our to-do SVG is also going to need to go in that public folder so that we can use it in the app. So you see the SVG is still there, but it really shouldn't have been there before, and now it should be here. And I can check that by going to front-end portfolio /n.svg, and I see that SVG. Whereas if I put it out here, it might end up being cached. Say I put it just in the docs folder for a second and reload. I'm just getting the home page, which is wrong. It should be actually an image, so that was just a little bit of a bug. So make sure that's in source, and then I reload that, I get the image on the SVG path. That way I can get the favorites icon. And also when we go to the somewhere along the line, this page, we need to get the to-do SVG as well. So the other app had a to-do SVG in it, and that was here. So we'll Control-C to copy that and then paste it in the source public folder. And we're still going to have a little bit of an issue. The favorite icon might work if we have the favorite icon correct in the index.html, which we copied from another path, so it's actually wrong. We'll need to do.svg and reload this page. Still getting that cached favorites icon. And we might need to clear the cache. So I'll just clear the cached images and files. And this is probably wasn't necessary. The reason I made a mistake here is that this was the index.html in the home page. Essentially, I want to do that for the to-do demo. So that would be in this one. Fix this to to-do.svg, and then if we go to that to-do, to-do link, we're getting that SVG coming in there, and then we go to the home page, we get the normal SVG. So that's the behavior we expect, but we're still not getting it on this to-do app page. And if you look in here, we're actually doing that inside of index.jsx at to-do.svg as the image source, and it's coming from slash. And if you check to debug why that's happening, you'll see in the network tab when you try to fetch to-do.svg, you can easily click open in a new tab, and you'll see the link it's going to is /to-do.svg without the final project portion of this. So this is just an issue where we're not getting that base path correctly from the Vite configuration. So there are multiple ways to solve this, but one is just to dynamically import this from the Vite project. So we can import this and call it, say, the to-do SVG source, and then we can have that as an import, and that way Vite can take care of it for us. So we'll import this from and we'll just do an absolute path, which will be slash, we'll refer to the source folder in our configuration, and then we can go to public and then to do SVG. So src slash public slash to do dot svg, and then we can have that imported properly. And we don't need source, sorry, we just need slash public, and there our SVG comes in perfectly, and that way when Veep bundles this, it can deal with this path for us. And now we have that, but we're still having an issue with the styling from here interfering with the main styling there. So it would be good to probably fix up the HTML so that we don't have this confusing issue where there's a header and then a nav. There's essentially a header here, and then inside main there's another header and a main, and you should not really ever be using those more than once, especially not nested inside of each other. So the better solution would be to just have the, if we look for main here, just have the entire thing be the main content. Something like get rid of this header and replace this with just maybe a React fragment. So the kind of void element, we don't need a footer because we can pull that from the existing HTML. And if we reload here, assets in the public directory cannot be imported from JavaScript. Okay, so they just would want this to be called something else. I think we could also just do the absolute path. Wouldn't be ideal, but we can get that in a number of ways. So for example, oh, we're doing away with that logo anyway. So we might not need that at the moment, but if we have the main content, where do we have that? Footer. Yeah, we have no footer anymore, but we do have styles that are potentially selecting main and footer and whatnot. So if we look for main, we have a flex grow of 1. We don't necessarily need that. We have a footer. We don't want to style anything in the parents. So now we're getting more consistent styling where we go between, say, these two, and we get those slight styling differences. But overall, it's pretty similar. So you'll see we're getting the footer from the index.html that was here. We're getting the header from there as well. And then we're getting the actual content of the page simply from the React app that's being rendered inside of main. And you see now we don't have those duplicates. We just have the main content containing all of this stuff. So if you wanted to bring that logo back in, you could. But you would have to find another place you would want to have it, because at this point we aren't, the React app isn't editing anything up here or anything down here. It's only editing what's in the middle. Somewhere along the way we lost button styles. I just remove those styles. Okay, and then remove the header styles. And since we aren't using the H1 anymore, we probably shouldn't style H1. also aren't styling, shouldn't be styling body because we're not doing a body element inside of our app. And we're also changing certain things in the root, which don't really make sense to change ourselves because we're not managing any of that stuff. We don't have the logo anymore, so we don't need that. And now finally you see consistency between the header and the footer between the to-do app and the other pages, which is what we want for a consistent app. We don't really want things jumping around and changing style, so we're only styling things here that we are intending to style inside of the app. And we probably also don't need this media query for the color mode either. So seeing consistency as well. Now assuming everything works fine in the app and all of our other styling is changing as expected, we're pretty much good to go with that. We could add the SVG back in, put it in a different folder if we wanted to. Let's make sure now when we npm run build that we see the same things in preview. And we would want to take a look for one thing, do we see our SVG assets being included there? And we do, which is a good sign. So here we have the home page, and we haven't added these links everywhere else, so we're still not quite good on that front. But if we go to to-do with a slash at the end, we can see we have an error as well, and that's because we haven't included this in our multi-page configuration. So we're going to have the to-do demo. We could call it anything and make sure that we're rendering or we're bundling the source demos to do index.html and everything that follows from that in our app. And while we're at making changes, we should go ahead and make these nav links consistent across all the pages. So you can click on the Explorer here, say I click on like the docs folder, and I click Control Alt F, then I can search for index.html and find all the places I have that file. So I'm going to start with the About page, and I'm going to add a nav link in here for the new to-do list. So we'll do demo/to-do/ and then to-do be the React.js to-do demo, and I'll go to the About page to see that link because it's only going to be there, but we're on the other dev server, so I'll go to this dev server here, and click the About page. And I've made a mistake because I'm changing the docs folder about, which doesn't make any sense. That's not the source code, that is the destination code, that is what gets built out. So I actually need to change it in source index. Now we have that link. It's wrapping around because things are getting a little small, but we can click that link and go to the About page, which is the expected behavior. So now we just have to make sure our nav is consistent across all the pages. Easiest way to do that is just to copy the entire nav and then go to each index file, find the nav, and just paste the new nav. And I have autosave on, so it's just gonna save as I make these changes. even have to do this on the page where the to-do app itself is, so that we can have a link to itself. So now when we reload and we go home, that's the only one we're missing. Now home has it. The home, about, clock demo, React Burger, and the to-do demo all have a link to that, and you notice the nav is consistent because the styling is the same and the markup is the same on every one of those index pages. And now we can go to the to-do demo, and we might want to add something to be a little bit of a heading here in the React code, so that we know this is a to-do list app, but it's not going to be the H1 because we already have an H1 on the page. So inside of the React Components to-do app index.js, I'll go to where we would have had that and just add, in the main content we'll have the H2, and we'll call this the to-do app. And if we wanted to have the logo here, that might be a more reasonable place to put it. Let's see if it'll allow us to do this public to do .svg. And it seems to be allowing that. I do think V didn't like this, but I think it's just because of the name public. We probably should call that something like assets or something else. And we'll find that SVG SRC. And we can put a little flex box around this. Div ID equals app header, or maybe a subheader. So there we have that, and we can bring back our styles for logo and finally whatever we had on header, of course, was deleted, so I'll have to go and find that. Was this. So we'll drop that in here and change this to pound app subheader. And at one point we also had probably some margin on the heading 1. Yep, some margin on the heading 1, so we'll just do that, except we'll put that margin on the heading 2 instead, because it's now heading 2, which is semantic since this is an H1 and you should only have one H1 per page. So that looks pretty good, behaving similarly to how it did before, but now it's in this larger structure with the footer and the header, and everything should be consistent across those different pages. Now hopefully we don't run into any issues with the public folder inside of here. Maybe we can just rename this, since public is typically not put inside the source folder. We could rename this to like assets, and it might create some import problems if we're importing that in any files. So let's look for .svg, not here, but in the search, the whole workspace. So not concerned about anything in docs. We have a bunch of index files, and then we just have this one, which should be /assets /to do svg. And I don't know why I got this weird replace view, but oh, it did replace it just fine when I changed the name. So let's make sure everything is running correctly. We have that image there. We have the favorites icon. I'll hit Control and reload. Still have the favorites icon. Still have it here. And then we will have to build in preview. So I'm not seeing the SVGs, which is a concern to me. So you'll see the missing SVG right there. So we have an issue with the bundling. Let's go back and rename this to public and see if it'll allow us to use the name public, which is reserved. The thing about this is it's a source code import, whereas the other imports from the HTML files are sort of web imports. So they're going from the web path, whereas this is going from the source code path. And so those things don't usually play nicely together. That's why there's a little bit of a challenge here. So here this is fine, but it's saying that they can't be imported in JavaScript. That might just be a warning, because I know this should set up correctly. So to do SVG, then the question is, does the preview allow us to see those images? So I see it there, Control reload, I see it, I see the other SVG there. I think we're good. Even though it's giving in that warning, everything is fine. So now I can do a git status, git add dot, git status, git commit -m, adding the to-do list app, or integrating, git push. And since I built that, my GitHub Pages site should also change. npm repo should take me to my repo, and I have the Pages site in the about link. So we're just going to be waiting for whenever this reloads and our bug that caused the favorites icon to not be there by not having that in the source folder gets fixed. And it's fixed, and now we have a new unvisited link to that. We have the SVG there, we have it there. Seems good. And only issue here might be that this is an H2 and it really should be an H3, and whatever styles we had applied to H2s in the style sheet were not quite right. So that was just something I didn't catch, but you know, I can fix that later. The basics here are working. We have two separate React apps on two separate pages, and then we have some vanilla apps on these other indices. So that is some of the challenges that you might encounter if you try to integrate a single page React app that was not a multi-page app with an existing multi-page app. you're just going to have to make sure that everything plays nicely together. Most notably, that if you have like a header and a footer that, or some other kind of standard content that you have across all your pages, like a standard layout, that you make sure you don't fight that layout or fight any of the styling of that layout in your app, because the thing about CSS is that it's cascading style sheets, so it cascades through every time you select that particular element. That's often why people select things by ID in their CSS rather than selecting by tag, like I've been doing, because then all of a sudden you have tags getting selected from places that you didn't even intend to select from, and the styling is getting messed up. We also had some issues with where the image assets were getting imported from, and had to wrestle a little bit with Vite to get things working the way that I wanted. But now everything should be all as desired. So thank you for watching. I hope this helps if you've been struggling to get one of your React apps you created outside of your multi-page app integrated with your multi-page app.